Awesome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the April 24th edition of Music Cities Together Live. This is Michael Bracy with Music Policy Forum and Music Cities Together. What am I doing? I'm sitting in my dining room outside of Washington, D.C., and we're thrilled to not only have you all join us today, but have a really stellar group of experts that we're going to be talking with shortly. Again, Music Cities Together Live is a co-production of, or it's a production of Music Cities Together, which is a partnership between the Music Policy Forum and Sound Music Cities. Today's conversation focuses on the role of local cultural ecosystems as they relate to music communities and how people are coping specifically with the COVID-19 shutdown and the crisis that we've all been dealing with. This is a weekly program that takes place live from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock Eastern on Fridays, and then is archived on YouTube for those of you who want to go back and look at prior programs or share this program. Some housekeeping. Even though we are in the brave new world of Zoom broadcasting, we really, this is a conversation program. And so we aren't using a lot of the Zoom functionality. Our very capable technology supporter, Alex Dolvin, who is helping us with backend, is going to be putting links and other resources into the chat room when certain things are mentioned by our guests. And then if you have questions throughout the day, you are welcome to email them to us at musicpolicyforum@gmail.org, or gmail.com, I can't talk today. Again, musicpolicyforum@gmail.com, and we'll integrate the questions into the discussion. So again, thanks to all of you for joining us. We know you are incredibly busy and have a lot of things to do with your days, but we are excited to get started with today's program. So at the front end, we have a real special guest, not that he is more special than our other special guests, but we are thrilled to welcome in Moose from the National Independent Venue League and from Marauder, who has been, Moose and his crew and network have been leading the charge with the launch of NIVA, National Independent Venue Association. I really can't talk today. And we asked Moose to join us at the front end of the program because there have been some exciting developments with venue advocacy this week, and want to share those with all of you. So let's see, Moose, are you with us? Alex?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks for having me, Michael.
There you are. Hey there. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. What can you tell us about the launch of the association, and what do people need to know?
Well, I think that first and foremost, it exists, and that has been our biggest accomplishment right now. Is 2 weeks ago, this did not exist. A month ago, it wasn't even an idea. And the concept of being able to rally all of the independent venues and promoters from across the U.S. together to be able to fight for their own survival probably wasn't in anyone's mindset for quite some time. I think any of the thoughts that did exist around organizing were more involved with antitrust or collective resources or any number of different things that come out of being organized as a trade association. What we've done with NIVA is we have just about 1,000. In fact, it might even be 1,000 by the time we all finish talking, members from across the states. We have every single state and DC represented within our membership right now. We have penned a letter to the Big Four. That letter is essentially outlining our asks, and our asks are, I think, reasonably common sense asks. The bulk of it is that these are government mandated closures, and that it's going to require government financial intervention to be able to see the reopening of these venues in any capacity. The majority of the venues and the numbers that we're getting from at least some of the local organizations is it's possible to see upwards of 90% of these independent venues are not reopened after this, without some type of very serious government intervention. And that's a huge financial footprint within the U.S. Like the numbers that have been bandied about from different reports is for every $1 spent in one of these venues, $12 is generated in local economy, and that's hoteliers, that's bars, that's restaurants, it's parking attendants, it's any number of different sources of income. And when you combine that with the overall economic value of just having a $10 billion footprint across the country, that's a huge liability if we can't continue to keep these businesses in operation.
Yep. So we are going to be bringing you and others to a Future Friday program to do an extended conversation about strategy and updates where things are going. I think the highlight again, just to amplify what you're saying. So the big four, for those of you who don't follow this, those are the bipartisan congressional leadership in both the House and Senate. And again, NEVA sent a really compelling and a very well structured and researched, basically an ask or an argument for venues to get this targeted support in future stimulus legislation, which is anticipated to be voted on probably late in May, may go into early June. That's sort of up in the air depending on a bunch of congressional factors. But the website is live. And again, Alex has put that into the chat, but it's nivaSSOC.org is the best place to go to get basic kind of information and background on what you're up to. And then what's the best way for people to contact the association? I know you're organizing chapter heads and all that. Is the website the best place to start, or where should people go?
Yeah, everything funnels through the website. There's a contact form, there's the public email address. You're welcome to reach out to me directly, but that would certainly be the easiest way to be able to stay organized. We have different committees that have all taken on their own causes. So we're trying to divide and conquer with the resources that we have. And we have a significant number of resources. One of the, silver linings, if you will, of having so many successful and accomplished businesses that are not currently able to operate is they do have, there's a large group of talented people that are active and able to do something.
Yep.
So we're very blessed in that respect that we are looking at our own members to be able to help lead the charge. And they're doing it. They're the ones that are calling their representatives. They're the ones that are organizing locally. There's a lot of state and regional chapters that are opening up for their own benefit and dealing with governors and mayors and other avenues of support that we might not necessarily be able to get to in as minute of a way. And we are we have a wealth of riches at our disposal. It's just really, it's really nice to be able to see so many people offering to help. Yep. And capable of being able to help. And we've been also very fortunate in that everything we're doing is only possible because we've gotten financial support from C-Tickets, from Light, from E-Tix. These are companies whose very existence depends upon the independent venues continuing to operate.
Yeah. Well, Moose, we really appreciate you joining. And again, the whole notion of a thriving independent venue sector is at the center of the work that we've done at Music Policy Forum for years, and work that I've been fortunate to do previously, wearing other hats at Future Music Coalition and things like that. And so we're just, really, again, excited and want to lift up your work and look forward to having you on a Future Friday and supporting you guys in any way that we can. So thank you for joining us. And we're going to, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep. And now we get to bring in Dr. Portia Sabin. Let's see if Portia's with us. I know she is.
I am. I just had to unmute myself.
There you are. Welcome, welcome. So happy to see you. So let's start big picture, if you don't mind. You and I share the good news, bad news that we've done versions of this work for a real long time. And you've been an entrepreneur. You now are president of the Music Business Association. Through your really remarkable work with the Future of What podcast, you've been one of the most curious kind of thought leaders in our community to kind of get a sense of where things are heading and where things are going with this complicated music community. Why don't you, if you don't mind, just kind of think about from 10,000 feet, even before the crisis, kind of what are the sort of fundamentals that you think about when you think about the music economy and the music industry, and what is sort of the state of play, especially before the shutdown, sort of as we turn into this new decade?
Well, thanks, Michael. I think, I feel like lately I've been describing myself as a, pardon me, like a crazy music fan who became a crazy music business fan. Yeah. Like I'm really a big fan of the industry. The more I got into the industry, the more I became a fan of the people who do this work every single day in all the different areas. There's so many different sectors that the music business touches. And one of the things that I really have been thinking about a lot lately, and I've been talking about it on the podcast and on the Music Biz Live that we've been doing, is the fact that we're in a really unique position today. We're in a better place, I think, than we were 20 years ago. The music industry sort of figured out since the digital revolution that largely we are better off working together than we are fragmenting and being sort of taking our little piece of the pie and huddling in the corner and saying, you can't touch it, this is my piece of the pie. And, to look at, the big picture, I think the passage of the MMA is where we really see the first instance of the music business being able to come together, the whole industry, and say, listen, let's set aside our differences for a minute and try to get some legislation passed that's going to help the industry as a whole. And I think from that minute forward, we really have, that gave us the actual hard evidence that we need to continue to work together. And I feel like the quick response to the COVID outbreak by all of the industry, everybody pushing for, sole proprietors and small businesses to be helped in the CARES Act is, sort of unprecedented. We're in a new place. I really believe that had this crisis hit 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had the organized and unified response to it that we've had. So I know that might sound like being kind of Pollyanna or too positive. I really do feel like that's where we are as an industry.
Yeah.
And you see it every day when you talk to people. It's just everybody's like, what can we do? How can we help? That's the attitude.
Well, and I think that's interesting. Before we pivot to, kind of like what's happening post-shutdown, I think that perspective is interesting because I completely agree that for many years, the industry was kind of viewed as a zero-sum game. And if somebody won something, somebody else is losing something. And a lot of the challenges we all collectively face were how do we grow the pie and how do we make music industries more functional and how do we really service artists in that conversation? And could you talk to us a little bit about your new position, because it's fairly new for you, and what your association does? Because I think a lot of our audience may not be completely familiar with what the Music Business Association does.
Sure. Music Business Association actually used to be a trade association called NARM, which was the Retailers Trade Association. And it's been around since 1958. So this is 62 years or something. It started the same year as the Recording Academy. It's got quite a cool history once you dig into it, which I did when I got the job in September. I did a little digging around, and that was fun because there are all these photos from the early 60s of guys smoking cigarettes. Like, first of all, they were definitely guys. Second of all, they definitely had cigarettes in their mouths. And they were like displaying how to put up a rack in a pharmacy where you could put LPs on that rack, because that was how LPs were originally sold in this country, was in pharmacies, drugstores, and grocery stores, which is a piece of history that I didn't know about. I thought that was really cool. So anyway, we have a long history as a retailer association. About 7 years ago, the organization realized, as I mentioned before, we all know the digital revolution took place. The organization realized it needed to open and expand its membership. So it started bringing in new members, the DSPs, publishers, managers, and even artists can join the Music Business Association. You can go to musicbiz.org. That's our website, and you'll find all the information you need there. When I took over in September, the organization was really well known for the big music convention that we do every year in May called Music Biz. So if this was a normal year, we would be doing that in about 3 weeks from now. And it's a convention that happens in Nashville. And it's been very well attended the last few years. I went myself 3 years ago for the first time, and I was really blown away. I loved the topics that people were talking about, and I love the people who were in the rooms. It's just the greatest place. To me, it was like the best parts of South by Southwest without any of the peripheral parts of South by Southwest that you have to deal with, like not being able to ever get a taxi. So that's what the Music Business Association has been known for in the last few years, is the big convention, the big annual convention. And, we still will be known for that. But since I came on board, I really want us to work harder on being a strong membership association. Music Biz is really uniquely situated in the industry because we have so many members. The RIAA is a very strong trade association, but it's for the majors, and A2IM is for the independent labels. There are these great trade associations throughout the industry, but they're pretty niche. We are unique in that almost everyone can be a member of the Music Business Association if you participate in the commerce of recorded music, which is, almost everyone. So it's a pretty wide net that we cast. So what I'm looking to do with this organization is to really reach out to the membership and figure out how to serve their needs throughout the entire year, not just with one yearly conference. One of the ways that we're talking about doing this is and this is sort of why I started talking to Michael in the beginning and various other people who are on this call. Before I got this job, I lived out on the West Coast, and I ran a record label, and I helped to put together a trade association for Portland, Oregon called Music Portland. You guys had Mara McLaughlin last week talking about that. She's the executive director, and she's amazing. And that organization was really exciting to me because it proved that the people who say that there's only industry in the towns in America that have major labels in them are just wrong. I mean, Portland is a thriving music town with many very successful businesses, including CD Baby in it. And so there's no reason that towns all across America can't have strong music industry trade associations. So my idea, now that I am running the sort of national music industry trade association, is to partner with local music trade associations in local cities and basically bring music biz to them. So we're calling it the Music Biz Roadshow, and we want to do that all across America. We want to bring people from our membership into local communities. We think that we're going to be able to foster even more community and togetherness that way, and have conversations all over the country about what's going on in the industry and how we can all work together. Yeah, no, and we're so excited about that, and we think that not only we have a number of public officials participating in today's meeting. We have music commissions, we have educators and university perspectives here, and I think consistently that's what people are really eager for, is for that sense of where do we get the knowledge, how do we share information, how do we know where we can play offense. You've got this amazing generation of students that are graduating from next level or next sort of generation music business programs, at places like University of Colorado, Denver, that need to know where they can fit in the industry. And so all of that sort of outreach is going to be so critical. And it's really, again, part of what we really like about the vision that you're bringing to this debate is again, trade associations tend to get fixated on how do they impact policy to get more funding or get, sort of policy made to impact the bottom line. And it's important to do that. And again, obviously we just, had Neva on to talk about the work they're doing around the next, stimulus package, but trade associations are a lot more, and they can really be helping with community building. They can be helping with, building networks and strengthening networks. And so we love that vision, and we can't wait for everything to open back up to work with you on trying to bring those conversations on the road. I want to talk a little bit, Portia, about some of your members, and we know part of the challenge in the music community is just the vulnerable nature, or the fragile nature of a lot of our business, kind of ecosystems, and retail clearly is a big part of that. And I don't know if you could speak a little bit about what you're hearing from your members, particularly your local independent retailers or others that are really, in the soup with venues and a lot of other folks. What are you hearing from those constituencies? Yeah, everyone knows that indie retail is taking it on the chin, and it's kind of terrible because this is really like the knockout punch. Indie retail has been taking it for a while now, for years now. As physical sales have declined and digital sales have risen, as a main form of, the way that artists make money and labels make money, retailers have taken it on the chin from that. And then last year there was the whole direct shot distribution debacle, which was a supply chain issue, which was in like the number 2 punch. And now the COVID, closing all the stores. They're in rough shape. So we started a series called Music Biz Live 3 weeks ago on Mondays and Wednesdays. It's a Zoom chat series just like this. And the point of it is to continue being able to host the types of conversations that we want to see happening in the industry with thought leaders and people who are on the front lines of helping others. So last week we did a roundtable on last Wednesday with indie retailers and distributors and sort of the coalition heads of the indie retail representatives. They're hurting. It's a tough time. And all I can say is we need to support them as much as we possibly can. the legislation was written in such a way, thanks to many, many people in the industry, that people who run small businesses like indie retailers can apply for the types of support that's available. We all know that that's been, a problem in and of itself. It hasn't necessarily, that money hasn't necessarily gone to the small businesses that it was designed to help. And there's another wave coming. So, I feel like this is sort of, the story is going to be ongoing, but I do believe that, if not this moment, then in the next month or so, there will be some federal aid that can trickle to indie retail. But in the meantime, we as an industry have to do our best to support those folks, encourage people to purchase online, purchase gift cards, as the country reopens. I mean, I don't know what's happening, but I live in Tennessee, where apparently we're reopening on May 1st. That'll be an interesting part of our lives. To keep an eye, go to the Record Store Day website. They have a constantly updated list of what the stores near you and what those stores are doing. So, if we do reopen here, I'm wondering if that means that, record stores will start being able to do more curbside, because I think that had been closed down. So just keep an eye on it, and let's support our local record stores. Much like we, have to have a conversation, and our next Music Biz Live on Monday is actually with Moose and a couple other people to talk about the live situation, because of course venues are in an even more precarious position. With a record store, it's like they could start doing curbside, right, but a venue, you can't do curbside, concerts. So it's the whole situation is quite volatile and new, and we're just trying to keep our fingers on the pulse all the time. I think the great thing about what's going on in the industry is a lot of the people that we've spoken to have been at big companies like Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, SoundCloud, and Spotify and Apple. These folks have jumped in and started to help out their own, and I think that that's a beautiful thing to see. I mentioned to you, Michael, that I feel like as bad as it's been lately, I keep coming up with silver linings. As I talk to more and more people, it's like, wow, stuff is coming out of this that I would never have thought. And that's actually making me feel better every day, especially about our industry and the way that we're helping each other. Like, I really feel like that's been an incredible thing to watch.
Well, and Portia, why don't we close on that, on those silver linings. And this is something we talk about a lot, which is, I think a lot of the people participating in today's meeting, and certainly the work that we do at Music Policy Forum and Music Cities Together, is sort of based on the idea that there's work to be done, right? I mean, that the structures have been flawed from the beginning. There's a lot of, piecing together that we all need to do to make stronger local music ecosystems and sort of a healthier music community across the board. And, we by no means are in the camp of like, oh, good, things shut down, so we hit the restart button. But there is the reality that when everything stops, then innovation can happen and things happen. And I know you are seeing that in your community. I don't know if you have a couple examples that you care to share about, like, what do those silver linings look like from your standpoint?
Well, the first one was when we were talking to Facebook and Instagram, and Perry Bashkoff, who's actually on our board, said that this is an amazing time because it's allowed social media to do, and the internet to do what it was designed to do, which is connect people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that really blew my mind, because, I feel like I've spent the last 10 years being annoyed by social media and just feeling like, oh, now I have to figure out how to do Instagram. To me, it was like this sort of other part of my life that I didn't want to be, because it's just because I'm too old. The kids love it. But, it's like I felt like it was sort of a problem in my life, and something that it's like an added burden, like, oh, I have to figure out how to put this on socials. And to hear him say that, and to realize that that's absolutely true, and that socials have been providing like a lifeline for people in this isolation, it blew my mind. I was like, wow, okay, I hadn't thought of that, and that's really great. Another thing that another of our board members pointed out, which I hadn't thought of either, is that for the first time in a really long time, artists, whether an artist is on a major label or an indie label or on no label, they're all on the same level right now. They're all on a totally level playing field, because they all are using the exact same tools to reach their fans. Mm-hmm. So there isn't a push right now. I mean, PR and marketing is not really like happening right at this precise second. I mean, it is, but it's not in the way that it has been in the past. So that is kind of an interesting silver lining. Another one is just, business efficiency, right? Reducing our carbon footprint, people discovering that, working from home is possible, and how is that going to affect the future and the new normal as we move forward? Are we going to, as a person who runs a company, I'm like, wow, I could save a lot of money if I didn't have to pay for an office space. Like, that's something to think about moving forward. Maybe that's going to be part of how we incorporate, what we learned during this pandemic into our actual everyday.
That's interesting. Well, Portia, thank you so much for your work and for joining us. And Alex has put links to musicbiz.org and into the biweekly chats that you guys are doing. And I really encourage everybody to check that out. It's really, those are awesome conversations. And, Portia's a much better interviewer than I am. So you can see what a real professional looks like instead of me. So anyway, Portia, thank you for joining us. And
thanks, Mike.
Thanks for all your work. And Jami, Duffy, you want to ping in here now? We're going to switch gears a little bit and bring in Jami Duffy from Denver, Colorado. Jami is the executive director of Youth on Record, which is, look, I love all of you the same, but I've said many times, Youth on Record.
Don't say it.
Rid of all of you. So they are a source of great inspiration for us, of collaboration. I was incredibly fortunate to join Jami to watch James Comey give Youth on Record an award 2 weeks before James Comey was fired as FBI chair. It's just our history goes way back. But Jami, I think most of the folks participating today know a lot about you, but why don't you give just the super fast elevator for folks who don't know what Youth on Record is up to before we get into our conversation?
Yeah, just real quick overview, and thanks everyone for joining. I know everyone has so much to do, so thanks for making time. Long story short, Youth on Record's in our 11th year. Our work is really about advancing economic opportunity, academic success, community activation, and mentorship for youth throughout the state of Colorado. We do that by employing professional local musicians as educators and mentors in our community. So our model really is very much about how do we employ local artists to do youth advocacy and education work at home. And then if you work for us as an artist, you get to record in our studio for free. There's a host of artistic sort of residency benefits that you get from working for us, in addition to, giving back to your community and getting a nice paycheck and paid time off and health insurance and all those great things. So that's kind of the very short overview. We were founded by the band Flowbots in 2009. And they have all participated in various forms. Stefan Brackett, one of the lead MCs of Flowbots, actually joined our team full time after serving as a board member. And so he's now our director of special programs. So we have 22 artists who we employ right now and a core team of 13. So that's fast and dirty.
Yeah, and part of, what is so important and inspiring about Youth on Record's work and how it influences the broader global conversations around music ecosystems is that it really works at that intersection of saying, okay, you've got a core community of working artists that need revenue, that want to give to the community, that have sort of a broader mission beyond just being a recording artist or performer. You've got a very specific community in Denver that is just in need of resources and support in terms of high school age students that are really trying to navigate the education system and are eager again for mentorship and leadership and community and have a voice. And then you've got the third piece of the puzzle in Denver, which is a very thoughtful and progressive local government that understands that helping put infrastructure behind marrying those two is able to activate solutions that otherwise would not exist. So it is just really showing how you can leverage and amplify the potential of really targeted investments in infrastructure and in philanthropic dollars to do something really special. And Jami, it's particularly hard now because you invest, and I know you are, I want to be really clear, and I know you would say this as well, obviously, that you are speaking today as a representative of a broad community. This is not the Jami Duffy show. This is you and a whole community of collaborative leaders that are working to build and sustain this model. And, you know, you all have to be really in pain right now, both the legitimate pain of the day-to-day, how do we pay rent? How do we keep our, you know, one foot after the other, just the basic economics of our lives, but also the core mission of what you do and the constituencies that you serve. So, I mean, starting off, like, how are you guys? Like, how are your people? I mean,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that from two angles. I think it's important that we all understand, you know, we're talking about the music industry and our sector, but when we're looking at young people, that's an area that we all intersect with. We either have children who are our own or children in our lives who we love and care about. These are also the young people who are the future of the creative economy and the creative sector and the arts. And so what's happening with our young people matters. And the perspective of what's going on with our young people is, as we've all transitioned to quote unquote online school, that is going to vary by community. So we've got communities whose kids have been on online school in these incredibly engaging ways, and they've got multiple devices in the house. And so the kids who are in 3rd grade and 7th grade and 11th grade can all take their classes at different times, and it's not easy, but they're being engaged. Then you have the other side of the coin, which is communities that are traditionally underserved, marginalized, underrepresented, do not have devices, do not have internet, do not have the technology. And then there's things in between. So some of Youth on Record's classes are in between, where, let's say, all of our local artists are pre-recording their classes, and kids can access those at different times, knowing that they have to share the one device in the home with the multiple siblings and cousins and things who are in the house. So knowing that, it's like we need to be aware of a couple things. One, typically in the summer, the learning loss is about 2 months. When you take into account underserved communities and communities of color, that's more because of lack of access to summer programming. We're looking at a learning loss for America's youth at a year right now. That's right now. That's if we go back in August.
Right.
That's one thing. The other thing is, when you think about school districts that have high dropout rates, kids who are sophomores and juniors are likely to not come back. They're not really seeing a reason. We've got an economy that's in the shitter. Universities aren't going to go back. They're going to go back online, if at all. And so that kind of brighter day ahead for kids who were on the edge anyway of maybe not completing, they're not going to complete.
Right.
And so we are, in addition to an arts and culture sector crisis, we are going to be in an education crisis that I think we haven't seen before. And so that is something that we deal with every day, because Youth on Record teaches in the public schools. So that's something to pay attention to. I think we're all aware of it, but it can't be stressed enough that the disparities in our nation are just being highlighted right now. And they're getting worse. And so, bummer, like a real painful thing that's happening. On the flip side, Youth on Record as an organization, if I'm being totally candid, the only friends of mine who are artists who are still working are working for Youth on Record or organizations that are serving the community right now. You know, so we know we've got artists who are still working at the Music District. We have artists who are still working at Denver Arts and Venues. We have artists who are still working at Cleo Parker Robinson Dance and Youth on Record. What do all those organizations have in common? We have a community-focused mission to serve in an area that might be outside of the arts. And so we've got 22 artists who are on the payroll, including contractors, and they're working and they're producing podcasts and doing programming every single day for Colorado's youth. So as an organization, I mean, of course, I'm scared that the nonprofit sector is going to bottom out. I'm really afraid about academic outcomes. I'm really afraid of the sense of trauma that young people are experiencing right now. So those are all things that are weighing on me, but people ask all the time, like, well, how's Youth on Record making it right now? Like, what's your strategy? And I think the truth for us is our strategy is the model that we had before this.
Mm-hmm.
And the model we had before this is, how do we increase the skill sets of local artists to apply their beautiful skills to another sector? And the other sector in this case is education and youth supportive services. So now we've got artists who can do both. And because they can do both, they're still working right now, and they're still serving right now. And so, yeah, I'd love to talk to you today or at some point about some of the things that Youth on Record is thinking in terms of getting more artists employed in COVID recovery.
Well, I mean, let's pick up on that. I mean, I think, and again, part of what we really value in your work is that, you know, you all stick to your knitting and do what makes sense for you and your community, but then you allow people into the conversation to say, oh, this is what we could learn from this. And you've been very intentional throughout the history of the organization to not try to take your model and say, okay, we're going to put it in a different community.
Correct.
Rather, look, we're doing the best we can do. And if what we do can help inspire others, we would love to understand what that conversation looks like. And so one of the reasons we want to have you today is because your team, I mean, they're very busy. They're not just kind of collecting unemployment. You've got them, your team collectively is doing a lot of work. And could you share a little bit about what they're doing now and what your insight might be into what that looks like over the next period of time, as long as that may be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we closed down all in-person programming on May 15th or March 15th. And we immediately started working in a couple ways. So we increased our out-of-school time program offerings and moved them all digitally. So we have out-of-school time offerings for Colorado youth 6 days a week. And so we have our staff of teaching artists and our partner artists teaching all kinds of things in those out-of-school time programming. We partnered with Soundtrap and got 700 licenses. So, you know, young people are producing online. We're starting a class on scoring audio. So Sean King from Devachka is partnering with a former student on that. We're going to be teaching young people how to do kind of that audio sound design. And an important thing that we're doing is just kind of creating these cohorts of youth. So artists are working on that. They're also, just like public school teachers are online, getting their lesson plans together and teaching 5 days a week, right? So they've got 5 lessons they have to prepare a week. In addition to that, one thing we said to artists is, like, we recognize that your 8-hour day is not your 8-hour day anymore. So we have every artist was able to pick their own research project. And so these are things that can steward us into the future. Some artists are doing a little bit of a deep dive into epigenetic trauma. And what does that look like in particular for communities of color, and in particular the Black community? So we've got some folks working on that. We have some folks who, we have somebody who is, you know, suffered from some substance misuse and is gone through recovery, former student, beautiful. So his research project is, how do the elements of drug and alcohol recovery, right? How will those play into the national recovery, you know, and even some of that one day at a time stuff. And so he's kind of looking at a project like that. So giving our artists the opportunity to research and deep dive something that they've been wanting to really investigate, that can see our community forward through the recovery, is something that we are paying people to do. We've also switched our podcast model. So previous podcast was called My Youth on Record. We have a team of 10 folks who work on it, former students all the way up through, you know, Sean King from Devachka is our host. The podcast has changed, so now we're calling it My Youth on Record Interrupted. And artists are submitting their stories of the now, just what's happening in your daily life, 3-minute snippets, right? So we're doing this kind of like humanities project to collect artistic stories now, so that we can kind of build a larger project. So, you know, we are busy. What we're really busy doing too is thinking about, what is Youth on Record's role in recovery? Mm-hmm. So I will say, I was so grateful when Kate said yesterday, and she's been saying this all like round and round, but Kate has been talking about how important it is for the arts to connect with public health. Well, we took that very seriously, and we are entering into conversations with the public health sector and the mental health sector. We've identified those as two areas where we could partner with and start to train artists to support those two sectors. So we're starting to talk about storytelling campaigns, trauma recovery support, doing some support around telehealth, and what can the artists, how can the artists be the community navigators of that? Because look, this idea that we have so many artists who are home and unemployed for the foreseeable future, my thought instantly goes to, what's the community need? How do we bring these two things together? And so the real nut that we're going to have to crack here is, how do we employ artists in public health and mental health? And also, how do we create an artistic residency out of that? So that it's not just like you're going to work on the front lines as public health, fine. But what is the artistic reflection of that? And so that's where our mind's going right now.
Yeah, that's just super smart, Jami, and thank you for lifting up the work of Kate Becker from King County, who
Totally.
Obviously is one of our key board members and partners at Music Policy Forum, and I think most of you know that, one of our responses at Music Cities Together and Music Policy Forum has been thinking about, again, what are the pragmatic things that we have control over as we go through the different stages of this crisis. And we are aggressively turning our focus to what can we, again, implement, and how do we, again, start to get our head around what is going to be a completely unprecedented challenge for the music community in terms of reopening live venues, in terms of communicating with audiences, and including making sure that music workers feel safe and protected, making sure that there's resources for venues to do what they're going to need to do, that dialogue is there with the public health community, so we understand what the protocols are going to be and the timing. And we are going to be making some public announcements the next week or two about some of the initiatives that we've been cooking up in our little virtual laboratory. But that's the stuff we have control over, right? What are the needs? How do we match our knowledge base, our area of expertise, the connections and resources we have with very practical things that we can do? Because again, and not to put words in your mouth, but something I've heard you talk about, Jami, which I would put through my filter is, there's sort of a, for lack of a better way to say this, sort of an existential dread associated with just sitting back and receiving relief checks, but not knowing what's my mission and how can I contribute. And I think that's especially hard for people who do not have access to technology, who don't have access to the super duper laptops that let us Zoom, or have access to the Wi-Fi or the other platforms that, we talk about constantly, the structural inadequacies in the United States that limit the ability for so many people to participate in our democracy, to participate in our education systems and our businesses and our culture, because they can't afford it and they're left out. And so, Jami, we put the Youth on Record website up in the chat. If I would suggest, if people in this meeting don't know Jami, but would like to get in touch with them, email me at musicpolicyforum@gmail.org, and I will traffic cop, just because I know your inbox is a disaster. So just email us. Yeah,
and one other thing, like a specific ask I have for this group right now is, as we are kind of doing this humanities project of collecting your stories, I will put up the link to where you could submit your story, but your stories are so important to us right now. What's so beautiful about it is, if you submit your 3 to 5 minute story to Youth on Record, you might get interviewed for our podcast, but at minimum, a student will work to score your story so that you have an artifact from this time. And you're also giving the student an opportunity to learn a skill. So when people are like, God, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do for the kids right now, sharing your story is actually of service right now. And we would be so grateful to hear from all of you. So I will make sure that I get that link for all of you. It takes about 20 minutes and you would really be helping a student out. Plus, you'll have something from this time that really is historic. So and I'm grateful to continue this conversation with anybody, and would love to keep talking to Kate about the public health aspects. So, and thank you, Michael, for putting all of this on and having us on.
Thank you. And now let's bring Maryann Lombardi into the conversation. And part of what's fun, I don't know if anybody caught the theme today, but what we really want to do with our guests is sort of model our organizing sort of paradigm at Music Policy Forum, because when we talk about ecosystems, we're talking about the interconnection of music workers, of nonprofit leaders, of advocates, and of public officials that all work in collaboration to try to strengthen our music ecosystems and do what we can. And Maryann is been doing amazing work here in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. Before that, as an artist and a performer and a member of an advocate and a presenter. She now is working with the newly renamed Office of Cultural Affairs. And Maryann, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michael.
Yeah, no, we're thrilled. So I'll start with the question I ask everybody, which is, how are you and how are your people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm doing fine. I am grateful to be healthy and have my family to be healthy as well. I think that our community is they're doing all right, right? Like there's varying degrees of challenges. Some are really struggling and having a really hard time, and there's other folks who are taking the opportunity for reinvention and pivoting. And so I think it's an interesting time in that way, because the scale is massive between those who may be finding a way through this and those who are really having a hard time.
Could you start, Maryann, and just, again, I'm very interested in how the moment that we are in now sort of was anticipated by the work that you and your colleagues have been doing, for a number of years, to sort of look at the DC cultural scene and the creative economy scene, and to try to identify where you as a public official could be an advocate and a connector, and the role that would be appropriate for you to play, in this community. And could you talk a little bit about where you have been in the last couple of years leading up to maybe February, if you want to pick a random month,
Sure.
Before we get into the crisis, just to frame kind of where we are now and where we go from here.
Yeah, so since I came into government work about 3+ years ago, most of the work started out from a really human-centered design approach and perspective, really going into the community and doing a lot of listening. And out of that developed the brand for the city, Creative Economy brand, which is 202 Creates, and worked with the mayor and our parent agency, OCTFME, to really build out this brand that really supported the needs of the creative community. But we really did take this unique approach of going out and really asking them. One of the great things about being situated in a media organization, which is what the Office of Cable TV, Film, Music, and Entertainment is that we had a level of resources on communications and storytelling end that we really could go out and talk to people and do videos and do social media and just ask questions and really listen. And out of that, we learned an enormous amount about what the community was asking for. And a lot of it was around community building and support in an entrepreneurship space. And so we really built some programming around that. And so that's what I did for the past 3 years, was to build out all that programming, the resources, the physical infrastructure for that to Create's brand. And now I run the new Office of Creative Affairs, which the mayor launched at the end of last year. And so our focus is slightly different. We're really working on policy, cultural policy. We're working on infrastructure partnerships and also economic ability for our creative workforce. And we are looking at it in a broad creative economy perspective, music being a big piece of that.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you who don't know DC, and again, now every Friday, I feel like I apologize to all of our Canadian audience members, because we have a lot of Canadians participate, and we tend to have a US-centric point of view, mostly because I'm curating this conversation, so I apologize for that. But for those of you who have not spent a lot of time in DC, Washington is a particularly unusual or unique community for a lot of reasons. One of the major reasons, obviously, is that on the one level, it's a very transitory community as people move in and out with different presidential administrations, or what happens with Congress and the transitions there. Then you've got a major university community, so a lot of kids come in and for 4 years and take off. But then you've got a very long-standing, living, breathing city, and a lot of people from this region. And music, in many ways, has become a proxy for a broader conversation about what is the future of the city, and some of the same conversations we see across the United States around identity, around economic opportunity, around public health, around who gets to make decisions about what we're going to look like in the future. And so the Don't Mute DC and sort of the whole organic organizing through the go-go scene, was one major example. It's been really interesting to watch. And so it's been, as a DC native, it's been really interesting to, on the one hand, look at the sort of organic organizing taking place with organizations like Listen Local First and some venues and other sort of, and music education programs. And then for Maryann and your team to kind of be engaging at a city level in a way that I'm not sure the district, I don't have enough institutional knowledge to know what came before, so I don't really want to speak to that with any authority, but it's been, I've personally been really enthused to see the growth of your initiatives and your role sort of as an in-house advocate to think about who is our sector, how do we define our sector, again, what are their needs and what role can we play with the tools that we have under any current administration, again, given the weird bifurcated notion of how DC's operated with some under congressional control and some under local control.
Yeah, well, and we really took an approach that we wanted to connect people by how they work and not what they do, right? And so we were really trying to link people up based on their similarities about how they're structuring their lives and less about the silos of their industries, because that tended to be the thing that most folks were very frustrated by, is that they just get left out in so many ways. But a policymaker or somebody who's doing data, who is an independent contractor or self-employed, actually has a lot in common with a designer who is functioning in that same manner, right? So we really did take that approach that let's bring everybody together in that interdisciplinary way. And out of that, we've created a much larger community of people who are really out there to support each other and trying to help each other and developing relationships that way.
And I know that we're not going to get into weeds on this right now, but I know that there have been some major successes through City Council in terms of tax policy for small venues and some other programs and initiatives that supported documentary filmmakers. And so there's some real concrete wins that have come out of the district in the last 5 or so years that really hold up as national models, have been interesting to see. But I want to pivot real quick, Maryann, and I want to talk now about, obviously we're in a completely different moment. And so, everything shut down. We were fortunate to host Aaron Myers a couple weeks ago to talk about his experience as a working jazz musician in DC and the concerns he's going through. Could you speak a little bit about how you and your colleagues are relating to this moment and any special initiatives or any sort of things that you're trying to put into place to kind of step up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we're really excited to launch pretty soon is that we're working on a mental health partnership with George Washington University. And what we have done is that we've paired up, our office has paired up with the university to offer mental health support for our creatives in this pay what you can model. And we're really beta testing this out with the GW, and we're very excited about that. We'll be launching it next week where people creative specifically can reach out in a specific way, and they'll be paired with a counselor. But the goal for this is to be able to expand this regionally and expand it nationally. Because one of the things that we discovered is that the university was at a situation where they have all these clinicians who need hours, right? And they need people to talk to, right, to work with. And just like any residents would be working in a hospital, the clinicians need to work with clients. And we have an enormous amount of creative community who need support, right, and need somebody to talk to. And so this isn't unique to George Washington, right? There's a lot of counseling programs all over the country who have these kind of circumstances. So we really are matching up a need that the university has and also a need that our creative community has and bringing them together in something that's highly scalable. And especially with the telehealth model, right? One of the things I think we're seeing during this time is that there are some either technologies or opportunities that we're sort of waiting in the wings, but we're slow to be adopted. And telehealth is one of those. There was a lot of hesitation about yes, no, maybe, how, all this. But now as a necessity, telehealth is like right up there. And so that has really allowed us to do a program like this in the way that we can, and it completely breaks down some of the barriers that were keeping people from being able to participate in this way. So we're super excited about that program and the expansion of that program. So, if anybody is in a jurisdiction or with a university that may want to talk about how to partner, that would be great. The other thing that we're doing is we're working definitely on helping creatives really understand the business of what they do, because we're really putting a big focus on business over brand, right? So much has been brand over business. How do you market? How do you brand yourself? All that kind of stuff. And all that's great. But what we're seeing is so many of our people are being left out of the opportunities right now because they weren't prepared. They don't have their whatever license. They don't have an incorporation. They haven't been tracking their money and their expenses. They don't know what a P&L is. They don't. So this kind of stuff, we're going to really double down on that business over brand over the next cycle from a programming standpoint.
And I think, Maryann, that's super exciting. And just to, to kind of build off that, one of the opportunities that these type of technology platforms give us is that in some ways, again, both because we're shut down and stuck at home, but also because we are communicating virtually in a way that traditional telephone video teleconferences weren't really able to do, we're able to help sort of do some connecting and some curating to pull together people who are thinking around same things on special topics. And I want to lift up Peter Grant is participating in today's, as an audience member in today's program. Peter organized a national conference looking at the intersection of music and healthcare issues that took place, I think, in early March here in DC. And he's been talking to, Bethany Musicians Clinic and Bethany in Austin and others. And so the idea of saying, okay, how do we bring some minds together to say, okay, what are we all collectively trying to solve around telehealth and health access is a conversation that we're excited to help curate. Another conversation that for those of you, again, who don't participate in this program often, that we're thrilled by is this emerging generation of civic leaders like Maryann and Kate Becker and Lisa in Denver, and many others who are also thinking about, from a standpoint of public service, how can they serve constituencies and how do they share information? So one of the things that we're going to be doing increasingly through Music Cities Together is hosting kind of special topic conversations as a supplement to our more general Interest Friday program to allow people to not, to kind of share in a more collaborative, kind of private environment. So that's something we're excited by. A third topic that we're looking at, again, to build off of Jami Duffy's conversation, is trying to bring together youth-facing music educators that are really struggling with what to do, in this moment with lack of resources. So that's awesome. And Maryann, could you just speak real quick as we get towards the end, just what does it mean to you in terms of interfacing not only across agency in the district, but also with your colleagues across the country and across the world? And what are the type of intersections and communications and conversations that are helping you not only do your job better, but also share the resources that you're developing here in the district?
Yeah, well, I think just conversation in general, and specifically with an honest conversation about what are the assets, liabilities, challenges, opportunities, right? Like I think that often. Also, the other thing is listening, right? I wish we'd spend a little bit more time teaching each other and practicing really strong, active listening skills, right? Because I think that tends to be how we figure out most things. Because most environments, organizations, partnerships are generated because people understand what the other person needs. And most of the time, what happens is that we all want to get up and talk about what we need. And so I think, but the more successful we are at really listening at what other people need, because we are experts at ourselves, right? The more we start to really see where those interconnections lie. And so I think that I spend a lot of my time talking to people and listening about where are their pain points? Because if I understand more about their pain points, I can help. And maybe the match isn't with me, but maybe the match is with somebody else I talked to 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh my God, you need to talk to so-and-so because they've got something that could meet your pain point. So those kind of conversations are incredibly valuable. I find for my work, and then the ability to just be agile enough to respond to them. Because a lot of times, because this partnership with GW happened like pretty instantly, and it's not taking any money. It's not about cash. I think sometimes we get a little too overconsumed with the question of cash. Like, this is a resource exchange, and that resource exchange is going to have an enormous impact in our creatives' lives and in their infrastructure, right? Like in them feeling better, in really being able to move forward in an effective way. But no cash needed to change hands. So I think there's opportunities on resource sharing, on cash, on all of these areas, and we have to be able to be open to having those conversations and looking for those opportunities.
So Maryann, we're getting some questions about where people can learn more about the mental health initiative. I know there really isn't anything right now to point people to, but where should they be looking over the next couple of weeks when you're able to go more public with this?
Yeah, so one of the things that they can do is they can go to entertainment.dc.gov, and there'll be some information on there under the creative affairs space. And they can also just email me directly, maryann.lombardi@dc.gov. And I actually mean that, so please do email me. And I'm happy to get you directly in touch with the people at GW. But we'll be able to launch more information next week about that direct contact.
Awesome. Well, we are at the hour, so we're going to bring today's program to an end. Maryann, thank you so much for joining us. And also huge thanks to Jami and Portia and Moose for joining as well. And obviously thanks to all of you who participated. Huge shout out again to Alex Dolvin for helping us with the tech backend stuff. Alex will be graduating from UCLA shortly, so someone should scoop him up and give him an awesome job. He deserves it. And it means a lot to us that you spend your Fridays with us. This program will be on YouTube later this weekend. Feel free to send it to your colleagues if you think they would find it helpful. We announce every week we announce our programming for the following week on Tuesdays and send that out via Eventbrite. If there are programming ideas, people that you think you would like to hear speak, if you yourself would like to speak, if you like the program, if you don't like the program, don't tell us. If you like the program, tell us, but always reach out at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. So have a great rest of your Friday, everybody, and thanks for all the great work you're doing, and we'll see you next week.